You're tuning into the deep dive because, well, you're serious about your UPSC preparation. Well, we definitely respect that.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the mains or building that solid base for prelims, staying informed efficiently. Effectively, that's key.
It really is.
Today, we're diving deep into a really critical point in Indian history, the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, and also the role of Sir Chettur Sankaran Nair, who sometimes gets overlooked.
That's true. And it's timely, too, with the Prime Minister's recent tribute bringing it back into focus. Shows its relevance for studies continues.
Exactly. So our mission here in this deep dive is to pull out the core stuff you need for your UPSC journey.
Yeah, we'll sift through the details, give you that crucial context, and really highlight the lasting impact, both of the event and the people involved.
Think of it as targeted analysis designed to give you an edge.
And just to be clear on our sources, we're drawing primarily from the Press Information Bureau, the PIB. So reliable, government-disseminated info.
Okay, great. Let's start by painting a clear picture then. Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, April 13th, 1919, Amritsar, Punjab.
Right. And it was Baisakhi, a major festival, so lots of people were around.
And the horrific part, British Indian Army troops, mostly Gurkhas it seems, under Brigadier General R.E.H. Dyer, opened fire on a gathering.
And it's so vital, for UPSC aspirants to understand the nature of that gathering. These were unarmed Indians.
Unarmed, yes.
Assembled peacefully. They were protesting the Rowlatt Act of 1919. Jallianwala Bagh itself, it's a public space near the Golden Temple.
So you'd have a large crowd, maybe many villagers who possibly didn't even know about the specific restrictions in place at that moment.
Exactly that. Now, why were they protesting? That takes us to the Rowlatt Act.
Right. Mahatma Gandhi had called for a nonviolent satyagraha against it. It kicked off with a nationwide hurdle, a strike, April 6, 1919.
A really significant early show of mass resistance.
And things got particularly tense in Punjab, didn't they?
They did. April 9th. Nationalist leaders Dr. Satyapal and Saifuddin Kichlu arrested. No reason given by the British.
Which obviously sparked protests.
Widespread protests, yeah. On April 10th, thousands hit the streets. The British response. Swift and harsh. Martial law imposed.
And Brigadier General Dyer was given full authority.
Full authority. So by April 13th, Baisakhi, the whole atmosphere was incredibly charged.
So on that day, this large crowd gathers at Jallianwala Bagh. Many possibly unaware of the martial law. Dyer arrives with his troops, blocks the only main exit. It's just chilling to think about.
It is. Deliberately blocked the exit.
And then ordered his soldiers to fire on unarmed people.
The scale of it. Estimates suggest over 1,000 men, women, and children killed.
Over 1,000.
The immediate impact, a profound shock. It basically shattered any lingering faith in British justice.
And became this huge rallying cry for independence, a key turning point that UPSC exams often focus on.
Definitely a turning point.
Okay, so let's dig into that trigger the Rowlatt Act itself. What exactly was in it that caused such outrage?
Right, the Rowlatt Act. Officially, it was the Anarchical and Revolutionary Crimes Act, 1919. It came in during World War I, which ran 1914-1918.
The timing is important.
Very. The main goal was to clamp down on anti-colonial activities, essentially to make wartime restrictions permanent.
So it wasn't created in a vacuum. It had roots in wartime measures.
Precisely. It came from the recommendations of the Sedition Committee, chaired by Sir Sidney Rowlatt. It was meant to replace the Defense of India Act of 1915, which was temporary, for the war.
Got it. So what powers did it actually give the British authorities? What specific freedoms did it crush?
This is really crucial for UPSC understanding the assault on civil liberties. It brought back major restrictions on freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, gave the government huge powers to control the press, basically stifle any dissent.
And the detention powers were quite extreme, weren't they?
It's extremely. Detention without trial for up to 2 years. Just imagine that. Imprisoned for 2 years with no legal process.
Staggering.
It is. Plus, you could be arrested just on suspicion of treason. Trials, if they happen, could be secret. No lawyers allowed for the accused.
Secret trials?
Yes. Special tribunals of 3 high court judges decided these cases, and no appeal to a higher court was possible.
No appeal either. Why?
Even evidence that wouldn't normally be allowed under the Indian Evidence Act could be used against you. And perhaps the most fundamental blow, it suspended habeas corpus.
The right to challenge unlawful detention. Gone.
Exactly. This level of concentrated power, it's a key thing to analyze when looking at colonial laws for UPSC.
So it just completely undermined basic justice, gave the British almost unlimited power to shut down any opposition. No wonder it fueled the national movement.
Absolutely. It was a clear signal. The colonial government intended to maintain control through repression, a major catalyst for the independence movement.
Okay, this brings us neatly to Sir Chettur Sankaran Nair. His reaction to Jallianwala Bagh really highlights the complex position of Indians working within the British system.
Sir Chettur Sankaran Nair, yes. A remarkable figure. Born in Kerala, 1857, a prominent nationalist, a top lawyer, and also a social reformer.
Quite a resume.
Indeed. Judge in the Madras High Court. And interestingly, the youngest ever president of the Indian National Congress back in 1897. His early INC leadership really shows his nationalist commitment.
And you mentioned social reformer. He wasn't just focused on law and politics.
Not at all. He held very progressive views for his time. As a judge, look at the Budasna v. Fatima case in 1914. He upheld the validity of intercaste and interfaith marriages.
That's quite progressive for 1914.
Very much so. A chelmsford stand against caste discrimination. He was also appointed to the Viceroy's Executive Council, a very high position.
Right, the top governing body.
Yes, and he contributed to the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919, which aimed to increase Indian participation in governance. That's important for constitutional history in UPSC prep.
So he was working for change from within the system, which makes his actions after Jallianwala Bagh even more powerful.
Exactly. Nair was absolutely horrified by the massacre. He saw it for the brutal injustice it was.
And his response?
He resigned from his prestigious post on the Viceroy's Executive Council. A huge act of protest.
Wow. That must have carried significant personal and political risk.
Tremendous risk. But it was a clear condemnation of British actions, a statement about his principles. Think about the message that sent, coming from someone so high up.
A very public break.
And his opposition didn't stop with the resignation. In 1922, he published a book, Gandhi and Anarchy.
Okay.
And in it, he directly accused Michael O'Dwyer, the lieutenant governor of Punjab at the time, of being responsible for the massacre.
Directly accusing the lieutenant governor. That's bold.
Extremely. It led to O'Dwyer suing Nair for defamation in a London court.
Ah, the famous court case. How did that turn out?
Well, legally, the jury found in O'Dwyer's favor 11-1. But, and this is the key point, for UPSC Nair refused to apologize.
He stood his ground.
He did. He used the trial itself as a platform to publicize the Jallianwala Bagh atrocities internationally and to argue that the British system was inherently biased and unjust.
So even though he lost the case legally,
his principled stand turned the trial into a symbol of colonial injustice. Ironically, it probably strengthened nationalist feeling back in India.
Fascinating. So the impact of Jallianwala Bagh just kept rippling outwards.
Absolutely. It was a major factor, maybe the key trigger, for Mahatma Gandhi launching the non-cooperation movement in 1920.
Though it wasn't the only factor, right? There were other issues feeding into the non-cooperation movement.
Correct. You also had the Khilafat issue, the growing demand for Swaraj or self-rule, and the economic hardships after World War I. Understanding how these all connect is really important for analyzing the NCM in your mains answers.
And there were other significant protests, too. Symbolic acts.
Yes, very powerful ones. Gandhiji gave up his Kaisari-Hind title, one he'd received for service during the Boer War.
A direct renunciation.
And Rabindranath Tagore, the Nobel laureate, returned his knighthood. These acts by leading figures really showed the depth of the national outrage and sense of betrayal.
Now, the PIB source mentions Gandhi initially withdrawing the NCM on April 18, 1919, due to violence. It's worth noting for our listeners, most standard histories link the withdrawal to 1922 after Chauri Chaura.
Yes, that's a really important point about source comparison for UPSC prep. Always cross-reference. Be aware of potential discrepancies. It might be a typo in the source or represent a specific, perhaps less common interpretation focusing on earlier violence. Good catch.
Okay, continuing with the official response. The British set up the Hunter Commission in 1919 to investigate.
They did. The report came out in 1920. It did condemn General Dyer's actions, unanimously, in fact.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
The crucial but is that it didn't recommend any real punishment or disciplinary action against him.
Which, of course, would have felt like another layer of injustice to people in India. Whitewashing, essentially.
Precisely. Impunity. Meanwhile, the Indian National Congress formed its own non-official committee. Leaders like Motilal Nehru, Gandhi were involved.
And their findings.
They unequivocally condemned Dyer's actions as inhuman, and they slammed the imposition of martial law in Punjab as completely unjustified.
Providing a stark contrast to the official British inquiry.
A very stark contrast. And finally, we can't forget Udham Singh, originally Ram Mohammed Singh Azad.
Right, the man who assassinated Michael O'Dwyer.
Yes, the lieutenant governor, seen as ultimately responsible. This happened much later in London in 1940. Udham Singh was hanged for it.
And his ashes were eventually returned to India.
In 1974, a sort of poignant final chapter underscoring the long shadow cast by the massacre.
So let's bring this together for our listeners preparing for UPSC. What are the absolute key takeaways? Why is understanding Jallianwala Bagh, the Rowlatt Act, Sir Chettur Sankaran Nair so vital for man's answers and prelims facts?
Okay, several core themes emerge here, all crucial for the syllabus. First, the oppressive nature of colonial rule. The Rowlatt Act, the massacre itself, they starkly illustrate the methods used to maintain control.
The sharp end of imperialism.
Exactly. Second, Indian nationalism. You see the diverse forms of resistance, Gandhi's satyagraha, Nair's principled legal and political stand, even revolutionary acts.
Different approaches, same goal.
Third, civil liberties,
Yeah.
the profound importance of them, and the dire consequences when they're suppressed. This theme, of course, has timeless relevance.
Absolutely.
So for mains, you can draw parallels, analyze the long-term impact on the freedom struggle, evaluate the roles of key individuals like Nair. For prelims, you need the facts, the date, place, people, the specific Rowlatt Act provisions, the Hunter Commission's findings.
And understanding how they all connect, not just isolated facts.
That's the key. Seeing the interconnectedness gives you that holistic grasp of modern Indian history essential for UPSC.
It really is a chain reaction, isn't it? One event triggering so much.
It really shows how a single horrific event could expose the moral bankruptcy of colonial rule and galvanize a nation. And Nair's defiance, even losing in court, speaks volumes about individual principle against state power.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've looked at the brutality of Jallianwala Bagh, the repressive Rowlatt Act setting the stage, and Sir Chettur Sankaran Nair's courageous stand.
And tying them together, you see, they weren't just incidents. They were critical parts of India's struggle for self-determination, for dignity. The lessons learned still resonate today in discussions about governance, justice, and rights.
Definitely. So for all of you studying hard for UPSC, we hope this discussion gave you clarity and context. Now here's something to ponder as you continue your prep. How exactly did Jallianwala Bagh and the respondents like Nair's accelerate the dismantling of the British Raj? Think about the mechanisms.
And maybe consider this too. Sir Chettur Sankaran Nair resigned from a very powerful position. What does his story suggest about the ethical tightrope walked by Indians serving the colonial administration and the different ways they navigated that challenge? That's another angle worth exploring for your UPSC perspective.
Great points. We really encourage you to like this, subscribe if you haven't, and please do leave a comment. Any questions, any insights, let us know. It helps us shape these deep dives for you.
And just a final reminder, our main source today was the Press Information Bureau, PIB.
Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.